Would the caller with last four digits 5892 please identify yourself? You're muted right now.
Sorry about that. My name is Abby Dwight.
Sorry, your name is?
Abigail Dwight.
Thank you, Abigail. We'll call on you in a few minutes.
Okay, I will call to order the regular Board of Selectmen's meeting, June 18th of 2020 to order at 7 p.m. And can we have the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To
the flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We will open up, the next part of the meeting is public comment, limited to 2 minutes. If you could tell us your name and where you live, we will take the public comment now.
We're going to start with John Gray, if you would, please. John, go ahead and speak.
John Gray, Patriot Road. Region 15, along with the first selectmen of Southbury and Middlebury, issued a joint statement on June 3rd concerning the current events surrounding race and inclusion. It was a timely message with information concerning how we, as parents, can talk to our children about what is going on in our world today. The joint statement called on all residents to come together as a community and make our town a place where everyone feels safe. It was a good message. It should have been built upon and echoed. Instead of heeding the call to come together as a community, we now have to deal with an elected official who is actively trying to tear our community apart. Selectman Mike Rosen has spent his entire tenure on the Board of Selectmen rallying against hate and bullying. Yet he has now become the very type of person that he decries, a bully. Selectman Rosen blew up social media saying that the joint statement didn't go far enough. Selectman Rosen called Southbury a town with a, quote, racism and bigotry problem. He has labeled those who happen to be white as racist and bigoted. Isn't that the very definition of racism? Generalizing people based upon the color of their skin? As an elected official, how dare you assume to speak for the rest of us and calling us, your constituents, racists and bigots? If you want to label yourself as a racist and a bigot, perhaps that would be right and proper, considering you, as a selectman, have tried to stop the construction of churches in town, namely the Calvary Christian Church, which would have been too close to the Rosen residents. You say you speak for all of Southbury, Selectman Rosen. Perhaps it's time that you resign your position as selectman and let the people of Southbury speak for themselves. Ours is a town with a proud history of standing up to racism and anti-Semitism. You clearly do not represent the town I live in or the people I know here. The people you claim to represent are not racist, are not bigots, and Southbury is a welcoming community. At least it was until you began your hate-filled tirade. Who would want to move to our town when you label all its residents as racist and bigots? Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment.
Would Tanya Moeller please unmute and talk?
Hi, actually my name is Tanya Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R. And so I would like to say that as the Southbury Board of Selectmen, you all represent us and are meant to be leaders and forward thinkers, and I like to also think trailblazers. So as an active member of the community, I've been in Southbury for over 10 years, and I've also recently graduated from UConn, so I'm quite familiar with Connecticut and the different aspects of it. And I would like to say that I fully support Mike Rosen and his call to action for us to have a more productive discussion about how we can be actively anti-racist. Blanket statements that say we support everybody regardless of race is not good enough. Black Lives Matter, period. We are proud of how many of our Pomperaug High School graduates go on to college, but how many of them get to college with a deeper understanding of race? It goes beyond police brutality and derogatory terms. Racism includes things such as microaggressions and redlining. And if you're not familiar with those terms, I highly encourage you to look into them because there are numerous amounts of articles online explaining them in different aspects. So that is my call to action, that I have read the statement that was put out, and it can be
Is it time up?
expanded upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment?
Could we have Meg Casella speak, please?
Hello, my name is Megan Casella. I'm on Scatticook Lane in Southbury. Hi. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I would like to talk about on the agenda discussion on the community climate regarding racism. And I'm asking that the Board of Selectmen, while they might not be able to have direct control in Region 15's curriculum, that they support and work with and hold Region 15 accountable for their work and actions in putting anti-racism into the curriculum. I'm also asking the Board of Selectmen to make diversity and anti-racism workshops mandatory for all of the Southbury selectmen and leaders. It is not just our educators that need to do the anti-racism work. It is our leaders are well, and you are not exempt. And finally, I would like to use these kinds of conversations, like talking about the community climate regarding racism, to be on the agenda more consistently for the Board of Selectmen in Southbury. As our leaders, you must take the time to discuss what's happening in the world and in our nation, and how Southbury can and will respond. Southbury is not a bubble. Southbury is not exempt from these conversations. Just because police brutality doesn't happen here in Southbury does not mean that there still isn't covert forms of racism happening daily in our schools and in our towns. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next public comment?
Alicia McDonald, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia McDonald. I live on Town Road. I've been a resident of Southbury for the past 19 years, and I want to say it is imperative for a fairly small and non-diverse town like Southbury to discuss the political climate revolving around racism in America. The white residents living in Southbury have inherently aided in the racism in our town and in our country. Slave trade was occurring in the late 1700s in Connecticut, and racism in other forms is seen here every day in 2020. Our country started with the enslavement of Black people and therefore is rooted in racism, and that does not disregard Southbury, Connecticut. It is important to know where we as a community come from so we can see where we want to go. As I hope some of you know, tomorrow, June 19, 2020, marks the 156th anniversary of the emancipation of slavery, other known as Juneteenth. While many people believe that the Civil War was the end of racism, that is not the case, considering they still weren't and still aren't seen as equal. And if you have a similar mindset, one that includes the confusion as to why Black Lives Matter or the lack of acknowledgement towards your white privilege, then you are part of the problem. I, as a Southbury resident, don't want to be a part of the problem anymore. I grew up in Region 15 school, misinformation about the foundation of our country. And while we were taught about the civil rights movement on a very shallow level, it wasn't enough. We need to be having these discussions inside and outside of the classroom, because what was happening to Black people over 400 years ago is still seen now translated in a different way. The wealth gap, employment rates, and housing discrimination, just to name a few. But currently this country is primarily focusing on police brutality. In the past 2 weeks, there have been many protests in every state in America, and that's including those happening in Southbury. Many Southbury residents are trying our best to be allies to the Black community, but we need the town's support. To conclude, I want to know how you, First Selectman Jeff Mansville, and the rest of the Board of Selectmen propose we discuss these issues in an effort to make Southbury a more inclusive environment. How can you add anti-racism work into Region 15's curriculum? How can we create a space for active reflection on how race has affected the citizens of color and the Black members of this town? Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment, please.
Abigail White.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Abby Dwight. I'm on 55 Silver Beach Road in Southbury. And I just want to say that I think the refusal to discuss and examine the statement put out by community leaders a couple weeks ago demonstrates a real lack of accountability for the meaning and impact of this statement. So I fully stand behind Mike Rosen's motion to, discuss what's going on in our country right now and discuss how that relates to our climate in Southbury. And I think lack of accountability for racism in our community and lack of accountability and understanding of the way our community was shaped and benefits from systemic racism is very clearly prevalent. This is evidenced by the statement release and the refusal to discuss it. I've sent some emails to selectmen in the past couple of weeks, as have some of my friends and family members. And some of the response that has generated is saying that discussing national politics is not the responsibility or a duty of a Southbury Board of Selectmen member, and also that they don't have the power to directly influence what happens in Region 15, and so therefore some of our demands would be better addressed with the Board of Education. And while I can understand that there are limits to what you can, to your power as a selectman, if you can't talk about this on the national level, let's talk about it on the local level then. I demand that you, the Board of Selectmen, put time into reflection and discussion during these meetings consistently, weekly, to deepen your understanding of why our community is predominantly white, which is to say, learn why Connecticut is so segregated. And I demand that in doing this learning, you begin to evaluate our relationships with and perceptions of surrounding communities that are predominantly non-white, especially those that are predominantly Black. And I demand that you support.
Thank you. Your 2 minutes
Thank you, Abby.
is up. Thank you. Next, public comment?
Okay, with the person with the last four digits 0248, please identify yourself and go ahead and speak.
Hi, so my name's Carol. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So my name's Carol Morrow. I live at 177 Laurelwood Lane. And I just want to start by thanking Mike Rosen for the work that he's doing, kind of to uphold a lot of views that I know me and my friends and a lot of the community in Southbury share as well. And something that I want to address specifically in Southbury's response, particularly to racial climate and Region 15 as well. There was a recent video that kind of came to light, I guess, of some of our students using racial slurs. It was a pretty long video, and everyone was talking about how shocked they were and how appalled they were by it. But it really has happened a lot, and it's happened before. So what that tells me is that this has been happening. We just haven't been recognizing it as a bad thing. So I really urge the Board of Selectmen to kind of address this. The bare minimum would have been to release a statement kind of condemning racist actions and racism in the town of Southbury, and we haven't even gotten there yet. So I urge you all to kind of hold that space for community members to reflect on their white privilege and how this has kind of impacted them, and racist actions that are going on also in Southbury. We are not exempt from this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment?
I believe that's it.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? We see none. Thank you. Next on the agenda, announcements and correspondence. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to reports. And next up is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Jason Bucksbaum.
Thank you, Jason.
Mike Rosen, second.
Mike Rosen is second. Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. George Bertram,
Aye.
Emily Harrison,
Aye.
Jason Bucksbaum,
Aye.
Justin Betty,
Aye.
Mike Rosen.
Aye.
And the first selectman will vote in the affirmative also, and the consent agenda passes. Transfers. Can I have a motion?
George Bertram, I'll move to approve the transfers as stated.
Okay, do I have a second?
Emily, I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on the transfers?
I just have a procedural question. It's Jason. On a couple of the transfers, it indicates that a town meeting's required, and I was just curious what our plans were to accomplish to be able to do that.
We'll have to work out that town meeting. I don't know if that's...
Executive orders that come into play here too that let us do some of this to get around that requirement as well.
Right.
Just noted that, and I was, curious how we're proceeding.
So to that, Jason, we're hoping that we're going to be able to, I don't know if we're going to have time enough to have a town meeting here. There are some things opening up, and we're seeing how many people we can accommodate here. And I hope to have some department meetings or commission meetings of the commission members, not with the public here, but we're going to try to work something out. But if we have to, we're going to have to vote on it as a board.
Okay.
All right, and we can call a special meeting for that if we need to. And I don't think that we'll have a problem with that. All right?
Mike Rosen?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I just further Jason's point, I think it's two of the full list of transfers that come into question there. It's the one for 17,000 and another one, which was the transfer to cover funds from Parks and Rec as a result of canceled programs. And the other one, I guess, is the 289,000 unassigned fund balance for the pension. So that just for the public, those are the two we're talking about.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll call the vote. George Bertram,
Aye.
Emily Harrison,
Aye.
Jason Bucksbaum,
Aye.
Justin Betty,
Aye.
Mike Rosen,
Aye.
and the first selectman will vote in the affirmative also. So we'll pass, and we'll get, if that passes, and we'll straighten that procedural out. Minutes of June 4th, 2020, and June 11th, 2020. Can we take them together? As a motion to approve?
Mike Rosen, motion to approve both minutes.
Do I have a second?
Emily, this is,
What, say that again?
this is Emily. I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. George Bertram,
Aye.
Emily Harrison,
Aye.
Jason Bucksbaum,
Aye.
Justin Betty,
Aye.
Mike Rosen.
Aye.
The first selectman will vote in the affirmative also, and that passes. We don't have unfinished business. New business is EOC update. I think we're bringing in Scott Furr for that. Can we unmute Scott Furr?
Can you hear me?
Scott, can we go ahead?
Okay, good evening, everybody. Ray, can I share, can you allow me to share the screen?
Sure, I think, Betsy, can you unshare?
Okay, I'll try it real quick. You cannot start screen share while the participant is sharing.
Scott, can you try to share?
Yeah, I just tried and it wouldn't allow me to do it. It said I can't share while the other participant is sharing. Okay, it just popped off, so let me see if I can share it here now. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on.
And it says it's still disabled. Ah, there we go. I got it now, Ray. Okay, let's see.
Are we seeing it?
I am not.
You should be seeing it now. Can you see anything now?
Not yet.
There we go.
Oh, looks like it's starting to come.
Okay. All right. What I wanted to do was try to give everybody a COVID-19 update. I'm not sure if Bob was on here. He was going to give some updates in the EOC. They're currently working on, I'll go ahead and cover some of those, but they're currently working on the plan to reopen Town Hall. They have decreased their meetings now to once a week. They are still actively engaged with each other and handling any problems that pop up. However, they're down to more of a maintenance schedule now, just meeting once a week. There's been a lot of news and media coverage of a lot of the COVID statistics going on in the United States, and I want to give the board an update on some of the data behind some of those talking points. It didn't matter what news station, they're all using the same ones. Some are accurate, some are headline grabbers to sell advertisements to get you to stay tuned, to see the latest forecast of what's going to go on. This is a very good website. It's called covidusa.net. And let's see, what I'm trying to do here is show you, we'll go first to the United States. And it's got a lot of data on here. I'm going to hit some of the key metrics. One of the things that I tend to look at right now is average cases per day over time, which is a logarithmic scale. Average deaths per day, which is also a logarithmic scale. They have a mortality rate over time, which I don't necessarily look at. One of the things that I've been watching probably for the past 3 to 4 weeks are the positive test rate results. They say this is a 7-day average. This is actually a spot shot of the last day that it was reported. The WHO has a target of 10% max. Right now, the United States is testing at 5%, 5.8%. That means out of all the testing they're doing across the United States, 5.8% of those tested are coming back positive. Now, one thing you've also got to understand, we're testing people multiple times. For instance, healthcare workers in assisted living facilities now are getting tested sometimes once a week, twice a week, and more often than that in some cases. So these numbers, these test perform number right there that I highlighted, that does not say that 25,403,498 people have been tested. Again, because we've got multiple tests on the same person. That's just the number of tests that have been performed. So out of that 5.8% for the United States, now we'll start to go on to some of the actual states themselves that have been getting a lot of press coverage recently. And I'm going to do it in alphabetical order just so it's easier that way so I don't miss one. First one up, I'm going to look at Arizona. There's been a lot of talk about how Arizona is seeing a huge spike. As you can see, their number of daily cases has gone up. But when we look at the average testing that's happened every day, we see that their positive rate is 18.6%, which is still above the WHO target of 10%. But as you can see, it was 26% yesterday. Then it started to drop. Arizona has a habit of dropping every 6 or 7 days. And I think what they do is it's a reporting catch-up. And that happens in almost all of the states right now. So you're going to see a jagged line. But what's important is back here they had a 7%, 6.8, 7%, 9%. And then they started hitting some peaks and valleys here. If you normalize that out, it's still close to about 10 to 11.5% if you take off the peaks and the valleys. And there is some error in some of this data that's being reported. Next, we'll go to California. California's been in the news. There was just 3 articles today that how they're running out of beds in the state and that they hit a new time high. Well, they did. 3,298 cases today, but as you can see on a logarithmic scale, while it's not flat, it's not quite a spike that we have seen in some places before, and we're still seeing in some other states. Yet, when you get over the hype of their max cases, they're still only testing at 5.3% positive each day, which is well below the WHO's target of 10% max. And as you can see down here, California has a fairly flat trajectory over the past month and a half. So to say that they hit a new high out there in the news media right now that everybody's starting to look at going, oh my goodness, what's going on in California? If you take a look back into history of their testing, it's been pretty steady. So they might have hit a new high today, but it still is not a spike and it's not making a trend. Let's move to Connecticut. Connecticut, as you can see, our daily case numbers have been extremely good. They've gone down and down and down. And I'm going to give you an expanded view of some Connecticut information here. Let's see if I can pop this over here. Can everybody see that graph now? Are you seeing an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is Connecticut data taken strictly off the Connecticut website. I had to go down and get every piece of that day by day, and I've still begun to continue to do it. What you're seeing is the Connecticut COVID percent positive graph. The blue line is the lab confirmed positive cases in Connecticut, and we see that it's been on a general downward trend since pretty much the 23rd of April. The patients tested number has continued to increase. You have peaks and valleys. Those are due to reporting lags. They will get some tests and start to run the test, but they won't finish up the reports until a couple of days later, and that's when you tend to see a valley and then all of a sudden a huge peak. It doesn't mean that there were more results or more tests given that day. It was just a catch up of the results for the past few days. As you look at the gray line, that's our percent positive out of all tests. You can see our testing numbers have started and continue to climb, yet our gray line, percentage of positives, is on a continued downward trend, and our blue line, which is percent positive, is on a continued downward trend also. It's very good news for the state of Connecticut. However, the only thing that I question, and there are some inherent errors in some of the data, and we can talk about those all night, and I don't want to get stuck on that. This graph right here is our daily hospitalization, COVID-19 daily hospitalization rate. We peaked on the 22nd of April. We've been on a continued downward trend ever since then. So I'm not sure what metric they're using to open the state. The numbers have been trending down for over 60 days now, and I thought the metric was 14, so I'm not sure what they're using on that. But again, that's the data that they've been putting out every day. The last graph I'll show you before I move back is, pardon me while I resize these to get this other one up, is the death rate. While every death is regrettable, the curve on the death rate has flattened. And the actual numbers themselves, as you can see, this is our daily death rate right here. And I don't know if you can see these numbers, but it's been continuing downward trending. 3 days ago on the 15th, we only lost 3 folks. Yesterday we lost, or the day before that we lost, or the day after that we lost 6, and yesterday we lost 9. So again, the rate of fatalities is decreasing, which is not a great trend. All right. And again, that's borne out in their graph that comes out here. Again, as you can see, our positive test results over time is continuing downward, downward, downward. All right. Florida. Here we have seen a big jump. The daily cases in Florida has risen, but again, it's only 3,200. A couple of days ago, it was 2,700, then 2,500, then a couple weeks ago, it was 1,400. They are above the curve. This is one of those cases in one of those states where they have gone above the WHO's target. When you look back, you see that Florida has maintained a 2%, 3%. Even after they opened, it did not take a jump, but it took a jump on the 17th. Some scientists and some data analysts are starting to say, okay, this curve began a few days before that, and they're starting to attribute it possibly to Memorial Day festivities. There might have been some large parties going on or something like that. That's what they're talking about in the respect of Florida. Okay, Oklahoma. Minnesota. Let's go to Minnesota. Here's a case where we can see Minnesota has been on a steady downward trend. Now, why, you ask when we talk about Minnesota? Because of all the social unrest, the protests, and everything else that's been going on in Minnesota, there was a widespread theory that we would see a large spike in the positive cases coming out of Minnesota. That has not happened. As you can see, the unfortunate loss of life for Mr. Floyd was back on the 27th or 26th. The unrest started on the 28th. We're well past the 14-day incubation period. We should have seen a spike at 5 days. I believe this spike was related to the lack of reporting for several days, which a catch-up was here. But then it dropped right back down when they caught up in reporting, and it's been a continued downward trend. Starting on the 13th, had the 28th actually been a date where the infection rate started to spread, actually starting on the 10th, we should have seen a secondary spread, which would have driven the spike even higher. We're not seeing that. Something's going on with this virus. If the assumptions of a general population have had it, and then it continues to spread, either the virus, as Selectman Bertram pointed out, with the Muller's ratchet theory, has taken hold and the virus has mutated to where it's maybe less contagious or less serious and more people are coming up asymptomatic and not getting tested. But that's not borne out in the testing numbers that we see over many of the states. And we'll bring the graph back up here and we'll show Minnesota. Minnesota has some testing spikes in here where they've done a lot of tests. Again, I think this is more normalized out with this data where you see the peaks and valleys should be reported over longer periods of time and it's more level. But as you can see, even with their increase in testing rates in Minnesota, where we would have expected to see a huge spike, we have seen a continued downward trend. So again, what does that tell us? I got to tell you, I don't know what it tells us, because there's something going on here that people are, it's either not contagious or it is a lot less potent to where many people have very, very mild symptoms to where they don't even think they have anything at all. I'm not an epidemiologist, so I can't tell you exactly what's going on. I'm just trying to present the data to you the way the state's reporting it. We'll look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been in the news for Tulsa lately. They are showing right now a 4.5% positive rate. Again, below the WHO's target max of 10%. And you should look down here on the graph. They're staying around that. Let's see, we got a high back here, 6%, 6.6%. It's gone down in the 4s, the 3s, the 2s, and then back up to 4.5%. So the media hysteria about the rapid growth rate in Oklahoma is not bearing itself out with the data either. Or, I'm sorry, Ohio. Here's Oklahoma. Oklahoma has had a spike. Ohio is in the news, and my apologies on that. Ohio is in the news as a success story. They started opening up several weeks ago in a very measured opening, and they have had a very constant graph down 3, 4, 5% range. Now we get to Oklahoma. The daily cases in Oklahoma. It does look like a spike. It's 452 cases in one day. You come back here and you look at their data, they're at 3.6% on a positive test rate. The issue with Oklahoma is they don't report every Sunday and Monday night, so they have some huge spikes in their reporting when they report on Tuesday the negative test results, because then it shows that, oh my goodness, look at that, they did a lot of testing that day. No, they didn't. They just didn't report the first 2 days, and they rounded them all out and reported them on Tuesday. Looking back at Oklahoma, here's Oklahoma's, and again, these zeros, the ones that you actually see zero, the days they don't report. But even with their spikes, they have a fairly consistent line of their positive rates. And it's still well below that 10% rate that the WHO is considering for any measures being taken. They did jump up to 7.1%. I believe that's on the 17th, and that was a catch-up day from the 15th, the day prior. Okay, hospitalizations. I've been trying to locate, because this should be another metric of how things are going. I've been trying to locate what the average bed usage is for the past years, 2019, 2018, 2017. The only place I can find that is in the financial statements of some of the hospital associations, and they look at it bed occupancy use rate, where they're talking on a margin of profitability for a hospital. And I'm seeing somewhere around 61% is where a hospital starts to make money as long as their beds are occupied. Kind of funny that somebody's telling a hospital you have to keep more people in the hospital instead of kicking them out the door, but I guess that's the way the money works. The CDC, the graph that you're seeing right now, is hospital bed usage for every week. They have not finished the data yet for the week ending June 13th. That's why you don't see the numbers past June 6th. This was pulled down off of their website about a half hour ago. This is directly from the CDC. And as you can see, May 16th, there was a widespread occupation of some of the beds in hospitals, and it started a downward trend for the 85 plus year group. However, the 75 to 84 year group, it appears, peaked on May 23rd. But since then, the trend has been a continued less beds being occupied in the hospitals. So the trends are not bearing out what the media is saying. While we do have hotspots, the general trends are very good for the country overall. And one last thing. This is from the CDC website. It's talking about hospitalizations. And this is the closest thing I could find. Again, it doesn't give me a week-to-week percentage. We understand that the older you are, the more this disease affects you. And one more quick look at some data. This is from the CDC's website. These are selected underlying medical conditions, and I call this the Big Five. And I've got the pediatric and the adult results up here. Out of all of the COVID cases that are confirmed hospitalizations, your biggest factor is hypertension. Your next biggest underlying is obesity. Then comes metabolic disease. Then comes cardiovascular disease. Then comes neurologic disease. As a whole, only 8.5% of the adult population that were admitted to a hospital had no known other condition along with COVID-19. These are all of the other underlying conditions, and sometimes people have more than one. But the point is, COVID-19 becomes extremely potent, extremely virulent. If you have another underlying condition, it tends to really attack your body and create a lot more havoc in combination with those other conditions. By itself, again, public math, 91.5% of the people had an underlying condition. Only 8.5% did not. I know that's a lot of data, but I wanted to try to explain a lot of the numbers that are going on behind some of the analysis. I don't think the media on either side is giving this its due. I think they're trying to sell advertisements, and they're trying to operate within the immediate news cycle of, okay, we were the first ones to say X, so they're not fact checking, and I don't think they're giving the complete story. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? If I can, Scott, so can you boil this down a little bit? You feel that we're getting out of, we're on the road to recovery?
I really do. This is Connecticut's positive test result over time. Watching in late April, I started trying to find this type of graph to say, okay, what's really going on? A lot of people are saying, okay, our numbers are going up. When you look at these graphs and they just present the numbers to you, you think, okay, yeah, your numbers are going up. But when you start to delve into the actual data and you get the numbers going up, but you also see where the amount of tests go up at the same time, that can explain an upward trend. The best news that we can have, which is what I think we've been seeing it began 2 months ago, this is, again, going back to Connecticut's graph, is, there we go. Blow that up for everybody to see. About April 22nd or 23rd was when we hit our peak right here of cases. And as you can see, the percentage testing, the percentages are on the right side of the graph here. Back around that time frame, about 60% of the people tested on a couple of days were positive. Yesterday, it was 2.26%. Today, it's 1.24%. Now, realize when I say today, that data is from yesterday, but that's the data they reported today. So, and as you can see, we're testing 13,985 patients one day. Again, these are probably rolled up tests from back here. And even at the low point, was 4,362, 5,030. So for a 3-day total, we've got roughly, come on. You got roughly 25,000 tests, and yet we're still showing numbers down here where our percentage rate over since the 10th of June, the percentage rate was the highest at 3.85% positive, then it went to 2.27, 2.74, 2.18, 1.94, 2.03, 2.26, 1.24. The data says that we're 1.24% of the people tested yesterday tested positive for it out of 6,430 tests. We're well into the recovery phase. And if you go back again and look at the hospitalizations, we hit our peak on the 22nd of April, 57 days ago. I'm sorry, 54 days ago, something like that. That was the peak hospitalization rate. We've been going on a downward trend ever since. Putting that with the fact that there was probably no social distancing going on in some of the protests and some of the social unrest that was going on around the country, which began in Minnesota. We're not seeing an uptick at all in Minnesota. As a fact, we've seen a continued downward trend. So I don't think it is as contagious as it used to be. I think there's probably some herd immunity building up. I can't say that with everywhere in the United States, but certainly in Connecticut, it appears to be that way. There are reports of a possible second wave. I don't think everybody has made it through the first wave yet. But I also think that there were early reports that there was a European strain and a Asian strain. And now even Asia is saying that they're being reinfected possibly with the European strain. Connecticut took the brunt, in the New York area and the tri-state area took the brunt of the European strain. The West Coast took the brunt of the Asian strain. And there was probably some intermixing in there also. We got the worst strain first. So I think we're over the hump, well over the hump. My recommendation, in the town, I think you're doing the right thing. You're looking at reopening things. I think it's time. But I also think that we should tell people, and we should reinforce the message, that if you don't feel well, wear a mask. I think that limited the spread in Asia a lot. That has been ingrained in their culture for decades, if not centuries. It's not going to start overnight in the Western culture because culture takes time to change. But if we start at least with the message now, if it does come around again, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and the epidemiologists are all over the map on that. If it does come around again and people are at least conditioned to take a mask with them and wear it if they start coughing or sneezing, I think we'll be much better off. The other thing is, if somebody's around you and they are coughing and sneezing or something like that and they have a mask on, I think you feel more comfortable also that they're taking some personal responsibility.
Mike Rosen?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Scott. Isn't it just as possible that, in addition, there might be that it's not, the disease isn't spreading as rampantly as people thought it might. But there's just as much likelihood, especially in Connecticut, where the fact is that if people wear masks, if there are two people in a room together and they are both wearing a mask and one of them has the disease and is asymptomatic, feels great, feels perfect. But if they wear, so I just think, I don't want to put a message out that if you feel sick, wear a mask when you go in public. If you're going out in public, the overwhelming consensus of the medical community is that you should be wearing a mask. That you should be wearing a mask, and that if one person with and one person without, it dramatically reduces the chance of spread. And one of the reasons why I think our state and New York even has had success better than some other states around the country in addition to the strain you talked about, and the reports are pretty clear on this, is that people are wearing masks, and that has played a role in being disciplined, and to your point, sort of building that into our muscle, like they have done in Asia over time, can really make a difference in helping us get back to opening the economy and opening restaurants and doing it safely. And I think it's a really important that that we continue to reinforce that diligence, I think, to our residents, because that's going to help our businesses get back on their feet and start thriving again.
I don't disagree with that completely, but I disagree with some parts of it. I think if you dictate that people wear a mask, it's a free country, and you're going to get mask fatigue, and then you're going to have people that just disregard it just because they can. So, again, it's not going to change overnight, but I certainly think that once we get to the point to where, and I think Connecticut's there, you're going to start to see people travel in and out. You're going to start to see people, we're already seeing people start to fly again a little bit domestically, but we're not seeing a spread. And we're already seeing some people come in from California that have come into the state, I know personally, over the past few weeks. So it's, well, I think everybody should be taking their personal responsibility to wear a mask. I don't wear a mask when I'm outside 100% of the time, certainly not when I'm running. I can't breathe. And if by chance I run by somebody, I'll try to stay 6 feet away from them.
Yep, and that's the guideline.
Yeah, so I'm trying to take a little responsibility, but at the same time, when we start to legislate that, hey, you need to wear a mask, people try to openly defy that. And I don't want to get to the point of making a criminal out of somebody that doesn't want to wear, that maybe medically can't wear a mask, and I can't ask them due to HIPAA.
It's Mike Rosen, and I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all, Scott. I think this is about respect for our neighbor, for your neighbor. Plain and simple. This comes down to being respectful for your neighbor. The safest and most respectful thing to do for your neighbor is for you to wear a mask, even if you don't have it and don't want to. It doesn't mean, and you're right, I don't wear a mask when I go walking and there's no one else around me and I'm just with my wife, but I have it in my pocket. So if somebody is coming by me and I'm going into a place where I can't physically social distance, per the medical experts, then I put it on. Then I put it on. So we're totally aligned on that.
But if we want to go by the medical experts, you've got two differences of opinion, because the WHO says 3 feet.
Okay, so let's.
So that's why I'm like, I don't know what the figure is.
So what I think Scott Furr was bringing here was what the statistics on the cases and what we're seeing. He's digested it, and I think the message is that we are on the down on. We flattened the curve. We're seeing fewer cases, and I think this is a positive thing that the things we are doing right now are working. And we should be in a good shape moving forward. But I just think Scott wanted to give this report of the statistics because we're hearing a lot of things out in the media in different ways and concerns, but these are the real numbers. And of course, we're getting increased testing, which shows increased positive cases, but they are dropping off, is what I'm seeing. Yeah. Is there any other questions from the board members?
Thank you, Scott.
Go ahead.
George, do you have something?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. How many of these cases are in nursing homes and assisted living facilities in recent weeks or days? Do we know that? Is that data available or not?
I had it. Stand by for a second. I can find it again. Gonna ask me your other question while I'm finding this. I'll get that for you.
I'm wondering also if there's any sort of contact tracing going on in the state and maybe in other states that enlightens us as to how these folks got infected. I suspect that's not happening in any great degree. I'm just going to ask the question anyway.
They were doing that, and they started, George, but if you don't get to somebody soon enough with contact tracing, what they're finding out is it's already a moot point. which means now that you've got to get somebody to tell them exactly where they've been and what they've been doing for a long period of time, and they got to remember it. So if you get a person that incubates fairly quickly, with 2 to 5 days, it's much easier than if some people that incubate 14 days, they're like, oh man, I've had a really busy schedule for 14 days. They are attempting to contact trace, but they're not having the success that they were trying to get to. So that's a mixed bag. I think they're beginning and they are learning from their errors. I think it'll be much better once we get to the end of this, but right now it's not coming out, it's not playing out how they thought it would. And one of the problems with Connecticut is they change their reporting daily. If you can see this right here, this is the nursing home surveillance. George, it's not all the assisted livings, it's just the nursing homes.
Okay.
But this is the surveillance that they've got. Let's see here.
I'm just wondering what percent comes out of nursing homes versus the general population.
I don't think they broke that out. I can go back and get those numbers for you and get it to you.
If you don't know, that's fine.
I don't have it off the top of my
I
head.
mean, it might be 50% of the people that are testing positive are in nursing homes, so it means it's even less likely you're going to get it out there in the general population.
Because they did have that for a couple of weeks. And then let me see if they moved it around. They broke it out, but I don't think I think they took it out as soon as they put it in for a couple of days. I have seen it reappear though, occasionally. I don't think they're reporting on it every day.
Is there any evidence that the virus is weakening in the state, or has no one really commented on that? Because that claim has been made by several hospitals around the world and the country.
Italy started that claim. University of Pittsburgh verified the claim. And supposedly in New York City, some doctors were starting to echo the same thing. Now, I don't know if that is because it's the Asian strain going up against what we formerly had with the European strain. I'm not sure. It's either that or it's one of the other theories that they have used around with the Muller's ratchet, which you and I had talked about before.
Right.
So I do not know. But
there's no new information then on that.
No, but there's been no refuting of that information as much as it was after the first 2 days. But once the University of Pittsburgh verified the claim and some of their lab studies and were able to back up about 2 weeks later, nobody has refuted it since then. And that could be one of the factors that the gene is mutating enough to where it is not as potent as it initially was.
I can only hope.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay, Scott, thank you. Appreciate
Thanks
very much, Scott.
You're very welcome. Thank you for letting me brief you guys. All right, I'm going to give the screen. You're welcome. I'm going to give the screen back to you, Ray.
Give us our screen back. Okay, so while we're waiting for our screen back, there it is. Next up under new business is a discussion on community climate regarding racism. We have been, this is on the agenda. Mike, would you like to start with that?
I appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for adding this to the agenda. I think it's an important conversation for us to have. I want to thank the residents who spoke in public comment, those who believe we should be having this conversation, and those who don't believe we need to be having this conversation. I want to make it important. I do believe, and I said it at an event at one of the Black Lives Matter rallies, that was organized by some of our young people from the high school a couple weeks ago, that I do believe that Southbury has a racism problem. And I know from firsthand experience that Southbury has a bigotry problem. And I've talked about that and shared my family's experiences publicly with this Board of Selectmen. And we've had good conversations, I believe, about it. And I don't say that every resident of Southbury is racist. I don't believe that. But as some of our public comment speakers very, despite their young age, very accurately quoted, racism is built into the fabric of American society. And it is something that I think over the past few weeks is coming to light and is in the spotlight, but that for 400 years, Black people in America have been dealing with. There were comments about, my points of view on churches and Calvary Church being built right across the street from me on Kettletown. I think everyone who knows me and was part of that debate knows it had nothing to do with the church. It had to do with location and building industry in town. I have a very good relationship with Pastor Trey and Pastor John, and I actually was with them at a Black Lives Matter rally 2 weekends ago that one of their young congregants organized, and I stood with them in solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement, and I kneeled with them in prayer and thought for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the amount of time that the Minneapolis police officer had his knee on the neck of George Floyd. So this is not about anything other than acknowledging it. I shared on June 3rd, when the statement was issued, an email with the first selectman and with the superintendent. And really, I wanted to just find out, and I made the motion at our last meeting, I wanted to find out the process that went into the statement, because and it's clear that I'm not alone, felt that it was lacking. I've had the good fortune in the past 2 years professionally to be working for a nonprofit organization that has helped educate me and open my eyes about the Black experience in America. And I've gone through an extended period of diversity, equity, and inclusion training that has by no means made me an expert, but that has certainly made me more sensitive to it. So what I then did, I guess it was on the 14th, thereabouts of this month, after not getting a response, a video made the rounds online. We don't need to get into it today, that had racist overtones. Without question, it was racist. And I sent an email again to Jeff and to Superintendent Smith saying we need to do something. And I made 6 recommendations. And I'd like to share them here so the public hears them. One was, I do believe that we as a Board of Selectmen, as leaders, need to publicly acknowledge that Southbury has a racism problem and has a bigotry problem. 2, I think we need to apologize to our Black and brown residents and our Black and brown students, both present and past, for failing to previously inadequately acknowledge the problem and failing to stand up for them. 3, I think we need to make meaningful investments in mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all town employees, the Board of Selectmen, committee members, including the development of a permanent DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion action and policy plan, so that when we are all gone, others have that to carry forward. Similarly, we need to make the same types of investments in training and forums for all Southbury residents. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, there is a group that Jeff and I actually have both been involved with, which was a group through the ADL, Strengthening the Bonds of Community, that has done some of this training through Region 15. Jeff, you and I were at a couple of those events last year. Those are the types of events I think we need to expand upon. 5, similar to how we developed an ad hoc task force to look into and explore the acquisition of Edgewood, of Edgewood, we should develop a task force that is a Southbury Diversity Committee that's comprised of our elected leaders, our residents, local business owners, our local clergy, to help develop plans for implementing with urgency this diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And finally, I think we need to establish, with the advice of our town council and in partnership with this committee, a one strike and you're out policy for any Region 15 or town employee or committee member who's found to use racist or bigoted language. Other policies and regulations should also be explored to make it clear that the town of Southbury will not tolerate racism and other forms of bigotry that are not covered by free speech, by First Amendment rights. These were just starting points. They're meant to be ideas for discussion. I also shared them with the rest of the Board of Selectmen. I think the town of Middlebury actually is a good model for us to follow. After they heard, I believe, from some feedback from their young people especially, they issued a second statement specifically from the town. And they took action right away. And I'm just going to read a piece of it. It said, too often individuals look, and this was on behalf of the entire Board of Selectmen, too often individuals look at a Black person and place on them wrongful and harmful assumptions based upon the color of their skin. Plain and simple, Black lives matter. Most Americans agree with this statement. While most Americans today genuinely think they do not hold prejudices, many subconsciously judge a person of color as poor, uneducated, and often dangerous without realizing it. Such stereotypes do not ease blending into society, but on the contrary, solidify exclusion. We cannot passively stand by and hope over time things will change. Our current practices do not work, and complacency while hoping for change is just a waste of time. If Blacks and other minorities truly have the same chances as everyone else, then the Board of Selectmen need to prove that fairness. Middlebury needs to actively include and promote people to lay the foundation for real, sustainable change. They then went on to create an internship at Town Hall for people of color and minorities, for high school individuals. They took action. The town of Oxford had a similar sort of controversy when they put out a statement after the rock at the high school was painted black with BLM on it. And they put out a statement that was in tone very similar to the joint statement that the region and the two towns put out, that essentially said all students matter, for lack of a better phrase. And it used the word all a lot. It didn't use the word black or people of color once. The next day, they issued a video apologizing, saying they were tone deaf and they got it wrong. And they immediately, within 24 hours, convened a committee of students and faculty and staff and town leaders to talk about race. And they promised transparency and that they would continue to update the town residents on the steps they're going to take. So those are the types of actions I'm hoping we will take. This is not a statement that all white people are racist or that all Southburyans are racist. But I do believe, unequivocally, and if you attended any of the Black Lives Matters protests in our town and heard from the Black students who go to or went to our high schools and our elementary schools and our middle schools, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. We have to have the courage to acknowledge it and then take action to start addressing it. And I thank you for letting us have this forum, Jeff.
Okay, I'll open it up to the board. If anybody would like to talk about that.
Jeff, Jason Bucksbaum.
Hi, Jason, go ahead. I apologize, everybody. This remote is difficult, but go ahead.
I know. It's strange not being there. But, I agree it is an important discussion. It's an important issue. And unfortunately, we have to do it remotely over the phone. But I assume there will be more opportunities in the future. I just had a couple of comments. We're all dismayed by the killing of George Floyd, which, among other incidents, has shined a light on systemic issues in our society concerning race, which has triggered an outpouring of protests around our country and here in Southbury. Though I reject violence of any kind, I think it's important to acknowledge with understanding and respect the peaceful protests that have occurred, especially the hundreds of young people in our town who have marched and spoken so movingly on this topic. These issues impact our community, and it's important to recognize that and to make sure we act in a manner that assists in addressing it. I believe it's important to speak with clarity and strength on these issues and to make it known that as leaders of our community, we condemn racism, bigotry, hate in all its forms. We need to open our minds and our hearts to hear others' perspectives on these issues. We need to listen and foster an environment of inclusion to make sure our residents feel safe, valued, and heard, regardless of skin color, ethnic background, religion, sexual orientation, or other characteristics. As to the joint statement that was issued, I've seen the criticism that was referenced here tonight, and I've reached out to and spoken to a number of people to better understand that criticism. When I read the statement, I see community leaders making an effort to bring people together, provide information, and start a discussion, while acknowledging the tragic events surrounding the death of George Floyd. I believe that is a positive thing, and I'm grateful our leaders took the initiative to at least start that dialogue. We should not take away from the very good intentions that prompted the issuing of the statement in the first place, and I do thank Jeff for signing on to it. An important piece of this discussion has to be a focus on education. As a starting point, the joint statement provided some information about ongoing efforts in Region 15 and included a link to some valuable information to help educate ourselves. On tonight's agenda, we have our head Librarians Report, and that report includes a number of resources on racism, including information for children and for discussing these issues with our children. I would encourage everyone to take a look at that information and other information, these topics, and help come up with ideas of what can be done going forward by both the region and the town. Moving forward, we need to determine our next steps as a community. My view is that this process will be most successful if we enter it without judgment, understanding that there will be differing perspectives, and we may not all agree. As elected board members with very little expertise in this area, we may not get everything exactly right, and we may not say everything perfectly. I can almost assure that. And that's okay, because we're all here to learn from one another and to do better. What should be expected of us, though, is that we ensure our community feels welcome and included by encouraging feedback, listening with an open mind to our neighbors' concerns, engaging in respectful dialogue, and working cooperatively to achieve what we believe are appropriate next steps. Last year, our board discussed finding a way to engage in a community conversation around similar issues, and I think now is the time to move forward with that concept. If we do, it's important that in setting up a community conversation on race, that it's done in a way that allows the free flow of information and provides a comfortable and safe place for residents to express their concerns without judgment or retribution. I'm hopeful we can come up with productive ideas to move forward with that concept. The first step is learning, listening, understanding, and conversing. I look forward to exploring next steps as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Any other board member that would like to chime in on this? Okay.
Jeff, Jeff, Mike, it's Mike. Oh, someone else just went, I think.
It's Justin. It's Justin.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, couldn't get my mute off. I just
Okay,
wanted to say
Justin.
that, however we decide to address this or move forward, I am more than willing to, chip in, whether it's a subcommittee, what have you. I think when you see what we saw in that video that was making the rounds on social media of the college kids, the high school kids, and a couple college kids, I guess, or I've heard. I think it's incumbent upon us to help Superintendent Smith make the changes or add to his curriculum, whatever the solution is going to be. I'd like him to know that he has our support, and I'm willing to certainly volunteer my time to help in that effort. Jeff, you and I both grew up in this town, and, I don't know about you, but I know personally the first time I shared a classroom with a person of color was my freshman year at Taft. So I don't presume to have all the answers, but I'm ready to listen and I'm ready to roll my sleeves up however I can help. Thanks.
So I will say this, growing up in Southbury, one of my classmates, when I didn't go to, I went away to a trade school for high school, but one of my graduating year of 8th grade, I had a friend who lived in town who was black, and she was my partner graduating. I had grown up with her, and she was a good friend. We played a lot together, and that was I think helped develop my view of people from that point as a young age in Southbury. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment on this?
Jeff, it's George Bertram. I've got a few questions for Mike. I guess my initial reaction is that these seem like a number of demands. And I'm a little bit kind of taken aback by demands, but I guess Mike kind of softened that up a little bit. I mean, you're not making demands, you're making suggestions, I think. Is that correct?
George, it's Mike. Yeah, absolutely. These aren't demands. I don't make demands. We all, I'm not in a position to make demands. I think we heard some strong requests from the public, by the way, in one of our comments. They're not demands, but what they are is, and same thing, I don't claim to have all the answers or be an expert in this at all. But one of the things I have learned in my 2 years of listening, talking to my Black colleagues at work, and talking to other leaders in this space, and having that privilege, by the way, to have that training, is that the first thing you need to do is to acknowledge the problem. So that's what I'm asking us to do. The second thing you need to do is to look your Black neighbors in the eye and say, I'm sorry, and tell them that you apologize and that you're going to listen and you're going to learn and you want to be part of the solution. And then the next things are to take action. And those action steps are to Jason's point. First and foremost, to listen, to learn, and to educate yourself on history, on history, and not revisionist history, on real history. I think, I don't know if anyone saw it. A descendant of Robert Lee, Robert W. Lee IV, who was a pastor in the South, the Confederate General Robert E. Lee, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post in which he essentially was saying, we must put the history of the Civil War to bed. It was a lost war. And he said, I am fully aware that the broken racist system we have built on the lost cause is far larger than a single statue. And this was about the arguments to take down the Robert E. Lee statues in his home state. But the statue of my ancestor has stood for years as an idol of this white supremacist mindset. The statue is a hollow reminder of a painful ideology and acts of oppression against Black people. Taking it down will provide new opportunities for conversations, relationships, and policy change. And that's, in some ways, what I'm asking us to do in town, is to begin to have honest, open, very uncomfortable, by the way, very uncomfortable conversations about race in Southbury, and really talk about it. And by the way, none of the six of us can lead that conversation. Frankly, if I make a suggestion, and I'm glad to those who, Justin, who reached out and volunteered, Jason, I'm sure everyone here would volunteer. I will as well. Our young Black students should lead this conversation, right? We should talk to them. We should listen to them, give them a forum, just like we do when we hear from an organization that wants to make a presentation on a new building or a new thing they want to build, and we give them 10 minutes at the top of the meeting. Let's hear from our young Black students and our Black families about the experience they have had in this town, and let's listen and learn from them. And that's what I'm asking, George. They're absolutely not demands. They are what I believe are tangible steps we can take as town leaders to help forge this hard conversation and to be role models.
Okay. Is there any of the other selectmen would like to chime in with a discussion?
I have other questions, but Emily.
Go ahead, George, if you're.
Emily, I'll turn it over to Emily if she has any.
Okay, if Emily.
To say first.
I think, first and foremost, of course, a man's life was taken that sparked all of this. And for that is a tragedy, truly. My heart bleeds for George Floyd, for his family, for his friends. Anytime a man's life is needlessly taken, it's just unacceptable, truly. And I believe any form of racism and bigotry is unacceptable as well. There's no denying that. But similar to George, Mike, these suggestions that you make, I have some questions about, and we talk about growth and opportunity, and certainly saying things like a one strike and you're out policy for Region 15 town employees, committee members. Where does that allow for growth? I'm not condoning that people use these words or make these statements, but I want to make sure that the conversations that we're having are going to make meaningful progression forward, rather than just labeling someone in one way, one time, and never allowing them to come back or grow from that opportunity. So I think that there's some things within these questions that you've laid out that raise concerns to me.
Jeff.
Go ahead.
Jeff, it's Mike. Can I respond?
Yeah, we just need to get recognized, that's all, so we don't climb over
exactly.
everybody.
That's why I was asking.
Go ahead.
It's Mike. Emily, thank you. And as I ended in that, these were meant to be starting points, ideas for discussion. And I specifically said on that point, I think we need to talk to town council and talk to partnership with this committee and talk to the NAACP Waterbury chapter and come up with ideas that are best. I'm not saying that the one strike you're out policy is the right policy for us to start with, because I do think the first step we need to do is training. We need to invest in our employees and help them on this journey, right? But after that point, that type of policy is a standard best practice. But before you do that, you're right. We need to invest in helping in that process, in helping on that journey. But again, these were meant to be starting points for discussion to get the conversation going, frankly. But I appreciate your point of view. I think you're right. We have to do it right. These aren't meant to be demands. They're meant to be ideas, just as I said. But thank you.
George, Bertram?
George, go ahead, George.
I think you start off with a problem right off the bat if you insist that Southbury acknowledge that we have racism and bigotry problems, because I know a lot of people in town that are offended by that. They don't feel that they're racist or bigoted, and they're not going to apologize for something that they haven't done. So those first two steps to me are problematic. I don't think they're representative of the people in town. I don't think a lot of people in town would accept that as being something they should be doing. I personally wouldn't accept that either. I mean, I'm open to discussion. Certainly, if we want to set up some kind of a discussion group or task force, that's fine. But I'm not comfortable with starting with item 1 and item 2. And I have other questions as well, but
I'll take as many as you want.
Emily, you have any thoughts on that, or?
Oops, sorry guys, having some trouble unmuting. No, I mean, I agree with George in that regard. I don't think any person in this town, well, I like to think nobody in this town regards any view of active racism or bigotry as acceptable, but to be widely broad-stroked and painted as having a problem seems to me to say that the majority of the town is racist or bigoted, and I'm not comfortable painting that language or telling people they have to apologize for something that they may not have said or done. And I think too, Mike, my other thing that I have some questions about, and I know you've mentioned a lot of times in your own experience and such about, mandatory training. And while I think community conversations be beneficial, and we certainly want to listen to the people of the town, the community, the citizens, and what they have to say, there's much research from the ADL and independent research firms that say that this type of training actually doesn't work and often has the opposite effect. And so do we really feel like that's the best route to take in having this mandatory training that has proven to be quite the opposite of its hopeful intended effect?
Mike Rosen.
Mike, if I could just for a second here, we did when the community conversations came around with the region, and they're wanting to make a better community, and you, Mike, you attended, I attended, Jennifer Naylor attended, and I'm not saying that other selectmen, there's times where you can make things and it's not an accusation of any kind for those who weren't able to. We all have some busy lives and it's hard to fit it in. But we did discuss with the ADL about what if we did it at town hall and what it would take. I think her name was Marjorie, and the advice from the ADL was sensitivity training being brought in to and making it doesn't work. She said it just doesn't work. It's not a good thing. We were asked if we had any knowledge of any problems within town hall. So we as a board know that that's what happened, and I just want to remind Mike. I want to remind you that I did ask you to get a hold of me. Maybe there's some other things we can do, and what could we do if it's not the sensitivity training, would there be something
Sure.
we can do? And we've kind of dropped the ball on that. So I'm suggesting that maybe we do some more work here to make sure that ball doesn't get dropped so that we can have these conversations. So that we can sit down, and it's unfortunate because it's even hard for us at this point to get together. I think we will in the very close future, we'll be able to sit down and talk about this. And I do want to tell you that, Mike, I agree. It's hard for us to have the conversation. I have had a conversation with a young man and his sister. The young man's graduated. He's out. The good news was he's black. He's not African American, but he's black. And his sister is also black. And we had a conversation here in Town Hall. And I'm not going to divulge the private conversation and where we started and what they did, but it was a positive feeling of a constructive dialogue of trying to make things better. I will say this. It was wonderful to hear that I'm trying to come here with not criticism, but with solutions. And I knew immediately that that's the direction I think we need to go, is not criticism, because criticism puts up walls and we're looking for solutions. We're looking to make things better if we can. So I don't know how, at this point, how far into this in a remote board situation, how much we can accomplish towards that. But what I'm hearing is perhaps we start with looking for those of color. I don't know all the technical, politically correct. I don't know all the time but the people of color we can put out that if they could we could start with that, because they would be the beginning of how they feel, what could work, what could we do to educate. Southbury's had a rich history of trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I think we've proven that before. I think we can prove that again. Maybe, again, I think to Jason's point, it may not be the perfect thing that every individual wants to hear, but I think we have to recognize that the intent is to do good things, try to do the right thing, and try to move forward. I would like if Betsy could put, I asked for a report, because there's also concern amongst the community, and it was expressed to me by these two young people about how they feel about police and assurances about Southbury's PD and how we are. So there's a memo that has been given that I asked the sergeant to look back at the last 5 years of these are reports, and it's up on the board and you can take a look at it. And it's called the use of force incidents. And this is where you have to use physical force on an individual in order to restrain them, whatever, and who they were. So you can see up there, this is back 5 years. He didn't have time to go back further. We can get that information as far back as they may, if someone wants to request it back further. In August of 2019, an officer deployed the taser at a white male at a traffic stop. 7 of 19 Southbury police officers used force with their hands on to bring a combative white male to the ground to get handcuffed. In 5 of 19, Southbury Police Department officer used a taser against a white male at a domestic, and 5 of 17, use of force hands-on for Hispanic male into custody after assaulting a domestic. And of course, then we have the 4 of 17. Southbury police officer used a capstun pepper spray on a combative white male at the scene. This is a total in our community of 5 instances, and they were all cleared as on there by the report and as appropriate use. That's one appropriate use, and that's what we have an average of once a year. And on the right side is you can see the arrests in the last 5 years for a crime violating, you can see the section up there. This has to do with anti-Semitism and bigotry. So we've had 4 instances up here that on that report of the last 5 years. And I'm not trying to understand, I'm not trying to diminish our responsibility to address racism, always make our community better, whatever way we can do that. I think back to when the Boones were here, I'm sure there were people in Southbury were thinking, well, leave them alone, but the majority of people said, we need to stop this. And the good news that I think we can show here is we have a police department that is restrained, careful about how they apply, de-escalating situations. I just want to say that one of the things that my administration has done has focused on hiring police officers that are community oriented and understand our demographics as best they can. And I think this shows that in 5 years, these officers are acting in a responsible and appropriate manner here in town is what I'm seeing. I don't see an excessive amount of excessive use or use of excessive force in the reports. So I just want the Board of Selectmen to understand that this is out here. This is a fact. This is a statistic. And that I want to bring at least a little bright spot to these discussions, that we are working towards a very inclusive and good community. And there is a lot of trouble for police officers today with everything that's going on. But I just want to say that this is the type of community policing that we've been trying to work towards with the type of hiring we do. Does anybody have any questions on this report, or would you like something more to be, would you like to see more years? I'd be happy to get that for you.
This is Emily.
Yes, Emily.
I think, I mean, you've touched on a lot of this, but I think it's important to repeat it, especially, I look at this report and I'm proud of our police department. We look at that use of force incidents and exactly what you said, Jeff, right? I mean, we have a community-minded police department. A use of force is not something that they are actively engaging in unless absolutely necessary. And I think that's important to highlight here. I also think it's important, and you touched on this, the pride that Southbury has truly taken in rejecting racism and bigotry. We talk about the Bund in Southbury. I know my own family signed that petition and saying, we reject this, we're going to keep this out of our town. And that's where I, have an issue in saying, Southbury has a problem when we have so much proud history reflecting the opposite. And so I think anything that we do going forward, my primary focus and concern is that we're making sure we're doing the right thing that's going to be the most effective. And I'm certainly open to listening to that and hearing what that direction might be. And as we said, none of the 6 of us are experts in this field. But I'm certainly proud of what Southbury has done, where we stand today, and making sure that we are rejecting this as much, every time an opportunity that we can.
Mike Rosen.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Emily. So a few things. Thank you for sharing the police stats, and I have no doubt about that. You'll notice that I didn't mention the police in my comments, and I will mention that there are actually many bright spots, Jeff, in these conversations to be had. One of them being that hundreds upon hundreds of people, young and old, have turned out for peaceful rallies, rallies in which two of our local police officers brought water to make sure that everybody was hydrated 2 weekends ago on one of the really hot days. One of the speakers at the event, a young student at Pomperog High School, who told his personal lived experience of the daily racism that he experiences in the school. Not crimes, not necessarily things he reported as crimes. Doesn't mean there's not racism. But he specifically said he feels very fortunate in our town that he's never had an issue with our police department. I have tremendous respect for our police department, a very good relationship with Corporal Grillo and other officers on the force, and appreciate the work they do every day and the risk they put themselves in. But that should not make ourselves complacent. I have tremendous pride. Remember, I chose Southbury. I chose to move here 11 years ago because I had heard such wonderful things about it from a friend who lived here, and I love it so much that I chose to serve, to give my time like all of us do, to serve on our Parks and Rec Commission, then on our board, and on my synagogue's board, etc. And I am very proud of our history, which is why I'm so adamant that we acknowledge the problem today. I believe that, Jeff, I think one of the first conversations you and I had was you telling me the story of your family and the Bund and how they were part of standing up against it. And you told it with such pride. I remember it. You told it with an extraordinary degree of pride. And I want to feel just as prideful for us as a Board of Selectmen in terms of the response we give to this moment in time today. To George's point, I have no doubt that there are people in Southbury. I've heard overwhelmingly the response I've gotten both through phone calls, emails, texts, people coming up to me at the protests has been, we're with you, what can we do to help, we want to support it. And most believe, and I believe, the overwhelming majority of Southbury today, just like it was back in the 30s with the Bund, are not racist. They want Southbury, they believe in Southbury, they have Southbury values. But they acknowledge that we have a problem because they know that that is the first step in addressing it. And I want us to stand up to it. And that is the hardest part. I've heard from two people. I got 2 emails in total from people saying when my quote from one of the rallies was in the paper that I believe Southbury has a racism problem. I got 2 emails saying, how dare you say that? And then I responded to one of them. It's someone we know, and I'm not going to disclose who it was. It's someone we all know and have worked with very closely. And I said, do you have time for a phone call? And I said, let me talk to you about the speeches I heard today from 4 young people, people of color, who went to or are currently in our schools. And I told him the stories, and he said, you need to keep doing what you're doing. It's clear, I'm out of touch with that. I don't have kids in the school. It's clear we have a problem. Keep doing what you're doing. That's part of the education process. And I think that is part of, and I think Emily has a point. I think there are mixed reviews on diversity training, by the way. There's a review from about 5 years ago now, almost, that states that it didn't have as good training. When it's mandatory, that it doesn't have as much impact. Quite possible. There are other stories that said the one thing it does without question, though, is that if you do it as a one-off, it doesn't work. But if you make it part of who you are as an organization, as a community, as a town, it can work. And it can change attitudes and ultimately change behaviors, but you have to keep at it. It's hard work. That's the one thing I've learned, to do it. So this conversation is a starting point, and I am incredibly grateful for it. Like I said, those were not demands. They were ideas to get this conversation started. We need to keep going. I will volunteer, Jeff. I will reach out to you directly, and I'd like to work with you to figure out what our next step is, so we can come back to the community, right? Especially to our young people who are saying to us, we have a problem. Whether you believe them or not, we're hearing from some members in our community, a large amount who are coming out saying, we want to do something. We have to take action. I'd like to be part of that solution. So I'll reach out to you at the beginning of next week and let's figure out a path forward.
Oh, okay, Mike. So let's, if we're going to be open and have a conversation and be open here, I think we also have to recognize that we have to be very careful about making accusations about what people say or how they said it or what wasn't said correctly. What I learned from the ADL from Marjorie was very insightful. And what she said was, you have to understand that because something offends someone, it's not always that they're bad people or they're bigots or they're anti-Semites or they're racist. Sometimes it's just a matter of we don't know. It's similar to sexual harassment where someone says, I find that offensive, would you please not do that? And the person is like, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize, I didn't know. And frankly, Mike, we live in a mostly white rural community, and maybe we're not exposed to this as much, where we would learn what might or might not offend someone. So we try to learn without the criticism. And I personally do know what it means to be accused of being anti-Semitic. It was made, someone said it, it was a powerful political person, and it was all proved not to be wrong. It all was proved to be not true. But I had to live with that through, and it was very disturbing to me and my family. So before we step out and say, you're not making the right statement, you're not doing the right thing, you don't understand, I think the conversation should be, can I talk to you about my thoughts on this? You're not a bad person. I would think from what I'm hearing from you, Mike, that you don't consider me a bad person or an anti-Semite, that I'm proud of what my family stood for. I'm proud of what my town stood for, and I'm going to be proud. I want to be proud of what my town stands for when I'm no longer here. I'm talking 20, 30, 40 years from now, when they look back at these conversations, that my grandchildren or great-grandchildren can stand up and say they did the right thing in 1930, whatever, that my family did the right thing in 2020.
Yep.
And this is what's going to make our community welcoming to everyone there is. And I think you know that sincerely, and I think this whole board is sincerely, that's an objective, that when we're gone, what did we leave better? Kind of like in manufacturing and Kaizen, you always want to do constant improvement. And I think we have an opportunity here too. So I think, without getting into all night long, I think Mike reaching out to me, we'll have a conversation. We'll look for some people who might, it may not be put together at one, like the next day, but let's start that conversation. Let's see what we can come up with, and we'll move forward with that.
Thanks, Jeff. It's Mike again. Just one last thing. One, I want to make sure that this is not about you. This is not about me. This was not about Josh Smith, our superintendent. This isn't about any of us. Because the one thing that we all have is the fact that we can walk into a room. I can walk into a room, and I've shared publicly my stories of bigotry, right? And Jeff, that's why I was during the stuff that went on last year, I'm the one who stood up here and said, you've never been anti-Semitic to me. I said it in a public meeting. I came to your defense, right? And I said I wasn't there. And then at the end of the day, I wrote the statement, all right, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen that we issued, all right? And I asked to write the statement. I offered to write the statement because I thought it would carry some more weight if the Jewish member of the Board of Selectmen did that. And we talked about that. So I agree. But the one thing none of us ever have to do is walk out of our house black. We've never had to walk into a room black. And this is different. And it is the one thing I have learned in my time in the training I have gone through that wasn't one-off, that is constant every day that we're working. Every meeting we have, we talk about diversity. And I do think you're right. We don't have a large black population in our town. But we do have one. And every one of them matters just as much as everyone else. And I'm looking forward to us moving forward this conversation to make sure that everyone does feel safe here, except people who are racist. And that really, to me, is what this is all about. That we will not accept those who have racist point of views in our town, just like we didn't accept, and your family and Emily's family didn't accept that bigoted point of view way back in the 30s. So thanks everybody for really engaging in an important and very respectful dialogue. And this is how it has to be. These are hard, but but we have to start somewhere. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else, or before we move on? I'll take that as a no unless someone can't get on. Go ahead. Did somebody want to chime in? Okay. We'll get to that, Mike. I look forward to hearing you, or possibly I think you and I can actually come together, because I think we can social distance here, and it would
Absolutely.
It would be nice to actually see you and
Yeah.
Someone different.
I'll call the office on Monday. I'm actually having breakfast with Kevin Bielmeyer, and then I'll call the office after and see if we can schedule.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. First, Selectmen's report. The first thing I'd like to talk to the board about is there have been people who have raised some concerns over filling the position of the social services. And as my administration has always done with every position being filled, we have taken the time to be sure that, to the best extent possible, we fully understand the current requirements of the position and the proper job descriptions before we fill it. I would like to remind the board that there have been many key positions that have been approached in this matter in my administration. For example, when I first got in, the Director of Community Services resigned. We had a little bit of a mess over there. And it led to the need to separate the senior services and park and rec back out. This left two departments without a director or in place. And during that time, my office, with the help of others in my office and other people, we continued to run the two departments without incidents, without issues, without problems, without a lack of service to the community they served. And then we had the loss of the Director of Public Services, or Public Works. And during this time, our roads actually improved. Public Works never missed a beat. Pumperog River Bridge construction was being done, and that bridge came in at $500,000 below budget. So we certainly were able to pay attention to the department and what was going on. And then we had the retirement of a treasurer and an assistant treasurer on the same day, unheard of in most fiscal offices, and on the heels of the auditors coming in to do their annual audit. The auditors said it was the best audit they had ever had. The fiscal office ran well. There were no financial issues. The hiring of the CFO is known to be difficult amongst municipalities and a struggle for municipalities. And I would venture to say that the timing of the process and what we did was successful. And with the retirement of the Director of Social Services, to my knowledge, there has been no need that has not been addressed. The calls are currently coming into the First Selectman's office and is being handled the same as it has always been. I had asked the Director of Senior Services initially to look into the Social Service Department. and supply me with a report that, report on what's needed. Tameth produced that report, and I'm looking that report over. And I also moved the social services into my office. I would ask that if anyone hears of a person in need, to have them call the social service line, and we will service them in the manner that we have always, Southbury always has. To my knowledge, and with people who have brought up concerns to me, I've asked if they knew of anybody who was falling through the cracks or was not taken care of or whatever, and nobody can tell me that they haven't had service. We've done the food bank, we've done the fuel bank, we've done the needy fund, we've done other referrals. So referrals are being made to the appropriate agencies and nonprofits, as has been done in the past. I want to say that the town is very fortunate in that we have very good staff that are very willing to pitch in to cover departments. I mean, I will tell you, when the community center, Betsy Rosa was down there making sure everything was running good, Cindy Harrison. So we have a good staff in place. And I'd also like to remind the board that, and others concerned, that we also had land use recently. It's a pretty big department, pretty important department, that had difficulty. The planning administrator became ill for quite a period of time. It was needing a lot of support by others here in Town Hall. And the zoning enforcement officer resigned to move out of state with his wife. Support was given to that department with the proper, till we came up with the proper replacements. And I think we did pretty well with that. So again, if a person or family is in some sort of need, they should just call the phone, should phone the social services department as normal. We'll work with them. We'll get the services they need and refer them to the right agencies. And I can assure you, we're working on getting the replacement, but I want to make sure that we do this right. I'd rather take a little time to make sure it's done right. As long as we're meeting the needs of the community, and if I see any problem with that, and I don't anticipate that, we'll make adjustments, and we are doing that. On a good note, the farmers market opened today. Urge everyone to visit the market next Thursday if you can. There's some different things out there, new things. And it was a little light today, I think, because it's the first one, but I think it's going to be a great farmers market. There was great stuff there. The other thing I want to talk about, some of the barriers needed to open Town Hall for the public have come in. We're trying to open up Town Hall, get it ready to open up to the public in an orderly manner. We've ordered, plexiglass and different things that we need. Some of the stuff has come in. Not all of it is here yet, so we're prioritizing some of the departments that really are critically need to be open. The town clerk's office, the tax department, things like this that people will need to come in. Plaster House Road Bridge is going very well. It is open when they're not working on it. So that's just during the day, during the week, when they're actually physically replacing some things, but it is open other than that. I just want to say that a lack of rainfall and the fact that we don't have beavers building beaver dams has helped move the project along. And I do want to publicly say, I do want to thank the crews of the Department of Public Works for their great work on this project. The crew working down there, and I want to say publicly thank you to the power company for Eversource. We had a problem with a power line. They were responsive, and they made it so we could get the work done quick. We weren't held up, and it worked really well. I also want to say that I think in the future, the next board meeting, regular board meeting, I hope that we can have it in person here in the room. We're not quite sure about the public attendance, and we're not quite sure about how many of the public we can accommodate. But the good news is, I think next board meeting we will be doing that. So press your suits, clean your ties, and shave, or put on makeup, because I hopefully we'll be here in 205 for the next room, and I think we'll be glad to hear that. Can we have reports? Any questions?
Jeff, it's Jason.
Yes, sir.
I just had a question. I was reminded with Scott here tonight giving us an update. I was just curious what was going on with the EMD posting, and if we've gotten applications in. And
I believe the applications are in. I think they're closed and last Friday, and so we're looking at that. We'll start looking at that, but really, frankly, our focus my focus right now, amongst other things, one of the focuses is that the IT position, getting a description, job description. George has been helping with the IT steering committee, and Ray, we're holding our own on the EMD. We're going to keep going forward with that, but there's been a little focus on that IT department. Ray is actually looking at me laughing, because I think that's a concern, is that we keep our IT up and running, and because it affects the whole organization, top to bottom. So bear with me on that. I think if you see what goes on in town hall all day, it's a pretty busy time. But we're going to they're in, so we'll probably by next week I'll figure out some kind of a committee to take a look at that, and we'll start the process.
So I couldn't agree with you more on the IT. I just wanted to, as the liaison to LEPC, I just wanted to offer up my assistance on any hiring committee in this regard when you get to that point.
Okay. Can you call me either tomorrow or Monday, and we'll talk about that?
Sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? Can I have reports from liaisons? Selectman Bertram.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
IT steering, as you mentioned, Ray has announced his retirement. I believe he's actually sold his house, so around the end of August.
I heard he's looking for a place to live for a while.
I got extra room, Ray, if you need a spot. Just let me know.
So we got a deadline, a pretty hard deadline there. I've been working on a job description. Ray and some other folks have written one. I'm just kind of reviewing it, refining it, talking to some local IT directors in other towns. I did speak to the Newtown's IT director, Alan Miles. He was in a situation 5 years ago when he took over in Newtown that the IT director never even spoke to Alan. So Alan came in, took the job, never even had a conversation with the departing IT director. So it was pretty hard, a lot of late night hours. I hope we don't get the same situation here, but I think Ray will be accommodative and help us out there. Newtown, by the way, does have a staff of 3 people underneath their director. Their IT group does not handle the schools. That's a whole different group. So it's similar to what we have. And my concern, I'll tell you right now, is I don't know if we're going to be able to find one person that's going to be able to do what Ray has done all these years. He is literally a one-man band. I mean, unless he can find somebody who can play string instruments and the tuba and the flute, then you might not get the band going so well. But we'll work on it. As far as Edgewood goes, there's a referendum on the 16th. I think we all know that. We did receive a letter from DEEP regarding the storage of their chlorine containers. They had a complaint from a resident, and DEP went out there and didn't find any environmental damage, and they approved the storage method, so that was cleared. ADA grants, we released a report on that. Tom Connor and Hugh Sullivan did a lot of research into that. We couldn't find anything, so if you're hoping for ADA grant money to rebuild Ballantyne, I don't think you're going to find that, and I don't think there's any particular grants with pools related to pools either. You can read the reports. I think they were released like over a week ago. We do have a pro forma P&L and a governance proposal or a management proposal, depending how you want to call it. They're ready for release. They've been ready for a while. I just can't get around. And Tom Marks, the fellow who's been doing our press releases, has been busy. So we just have to put a press release out when we get those released, but that could be any day now. We did have an appraiser visit earlier this week. Jeff Tinley did hire an appraiser, and he was at the facility. I was there with him, with other people, and including John Michaels. And we're hoping for the report by the end of the month. We've given him a hard deadline. We want to get it in by the end of June. He says he can do it. The pool inspection was completed. We're waiting for a report. The inspector, Michael Fortuna, said he would cut us a significant break on his rate since he was going to charge us $3,000, but he found the pool to be in such good shape. And particularly, he mentioned that the control room was so well laid out and easy to understand that he didn't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how things worked, and everything looked very good. So he's going to cut us a break on the charge. He made it clear that most private pools are not like that. They're not. He didn't know what he was getting into when he came here, but he was impressed. So that's good news. We're planning to set up a re-inspection with the building inspector, Giuseppe Volpato, I think his name was, from National Building Inspections. But anyway, we're going to have him come back out if possible, and I think it is possible, to just do a punch list check on the work that he suggested get done before we acquired the place. I believe most of that is completed by the owners at Edgewood, and that includes replacing the pool heaters. The old pool heaters, the 10-year-old heaters, were replaced, and they're now brand new ones. They had agreed to do that, so that's all in the works. The open house at Edgewood occurred last weekend. It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was very well attended. We had 200 flyers printed up. We thought that would be sufficient, but the 200 flyers were completely gone, and a lot of the groups came in. Some groups didn't take any flyers. Some groups, multiple people only took one. So we think maybe 500 people went through. I don't know. We're only guessing, but it was a very good turnout. A lot of positive feedback. Surprising to me, anyway, that a lot of the visitors came from Heritage Village. They wanted to see it, and I asked some of them about it. And apparently, the state of the Heritage Village recreational facilities isn't quite as wonderful as they would like it to be. I guess high cost of maintenance, and there's been some deterioration over time. I don't want to bash Heritage Village, but that was a comment that I heard. And the other comment from them is that they can't readily take their grandkids to the pools at Heritage Village, even though kids are sometimes admitted at certain times by the rules. Other folks at HV, the other residents, aren't really welcoming their presence, so it's not an easy situation if you want to take your grandkids in a pool there. The zero entry pool feature was seen as a big plus by the seniors. And we had some comments from some seniors that they wouldn't even use the pool. They just wanted to go there and see like lively life, and play mahjong under the umbrellas. And so I thought that was interesting. I always thought Edgewood was more for kids and young families, but I have a feeling in this case, seniors are going to take advantage of it in a big way. And of course, the heated pool is seen as a big plus. I've heard that the water at Ballantyne it's almost like doing a polar bear dive kind of thing sometimes. We're going to schedule one more review meeting prior to the referendum. I keep pushing it back. I know I've had some criticism on that, and that's a fair criticism. And we said it would be in May, then we said June, but we keep getting more information, and I'm wondering if we want to push that back until we get it all in, or I mean, we could do it any time, really. I could schedule it in a week or so, or wait till early July until we get all the appraisal and all that stuff in. So if any of you have comments on that, I'm all ears. And I think the next meeting, I'd like to have a different kind of meeting, maybe with more public comment, maybe a bit of a debate between people, pro and con. I don't know. I'm thinking about that. And again, if you folks have any ideas, lay them on me. Mobile Telecom Task Force, Joe Ruggiero hasn't done a lot, but he does have his test rig up and running, and he's ready to start running. I invited myself to go with him when he starts. I'd love to see how it works. Road study, we still have the Jeremy Swamp extension issue, the road extension. I thought that was on the agenda for tonight, but if it's not, that's great. I'm talked out, really. Radio refresh with the police, no update. Tax abatement, it's kind of come back, and I guess the Board of Finance is pushing for more action on that. And Jeff's in the middle. I'm not going to say anything more. Strategic Planning Commission, they would like to start presenting, and they will start hopefully sometime in July. Jeff makes the agenda, so he's going to have to review their presentation and see where it fits in. But they will like to do the affordable housing presentation sometime at a meeting in July. That's it, folks.
Thank you. Selectman Betty?
I think I put him to sleep.
Justin, are you there?
Just on mute here. Got some kids in the background.
That's okay.
Not a lot to report on my side, folks. We all saw the Senior Services Director's report. She's working with the EOC on plans to reopen the center, but at this point, people or the public will not be allowed in the building until September 1st. IPOC doesn't meet again until August, and really economic development. I think we're all seeing, Kevin being very active with pushing information out to our business community, and I know I had a local business reach out to me about, hey, how do I get, how do I pursue something? And I got him in touch with Kevin, and he was in touch with them the very next business morning. So I know he's active out there and doing his best to make things happen. Not an easy environment to do that, but he's certainly proactive. So that's all I got.
So I just want to, on economic development and the opening and all that, how many of the selectmen went out to dinner last night? Oh, okay. Well, we won't call that. I did. I went out and sat inside one of my many favorite restaurants in town, and it was nice to see the owners and the people, and it was good. So I just want to kind of get our selectmen. Let's make sure we're out there supporting them.
Amen.
Jason.
No, none of the historic committees met, and for LEPC, I think we've heard a lot tonight from Scott and EOC, and from what you were just talking about. Obviously, it's a phase 2. We want to support our businesses. Kevin's a big part of what's going on in EOC right now, and they're looking at reopening plans and in-person meetings and stuff like that. Now related to my committees, I'll just mention I was able to attend the Flag Day ceremony on Sunday. Which is also always a very nice event, and they also used it because of the way the high school graduation and the end of year worked out this year. They used it as the opportunity for the veterans organizations in town to give their annual scholarships to a number of Region 15 students, which was very nice to see. So it was actually a pretty well attended event on Sunday.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Selectman Harrison.
EMS committee meets next week and the library report. Unfortunately, it was canceled again this month, but hoping we can maybe get together next month.
And on the library, Emily, I think we are working diligently to get it opened up to the public. People have been requesting that more and more, but we still need to take the proper steps to make sure we
Continue to use the call-in for the window service and keep renting.
Yeah. Mike Rosen,
Thanks, Jeff.
you still with us?
I am still with you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Parks and Rec hasn't met since our last. They meet next a week from today on the 25th. I'm eager to get an update. We approved today the staff for the summer camp program, and I'm eager to get an update on how that's going from those folks. Planning did meet, by the way, last night, and I was on with them. And nothing specifically of note. They pretty much approved everything that was on their agenda. They set a couple of public hearings. One for a 14-unit development under the Connecticut Affordable Housing Appeal Statutes for mid-September. They sent another one regarding the pedestrian study for mid to late October. And they caught up on approving minutes that had dated back to February. I was strongly encouraging them to try to get that done. For transparency to the public, so those minutes could go public, and they got all that done. And it was a pretty short meeting. And Region 15, next meeting is on the 22nd, which is their last meeting of the year. I do want to note, and Jason sort of referenced a little bit of it in terms of having some of the students at the Flag Day ceremony. I do want to give an enormous shout out to the entire Region 15 administration, the entire faculty, the entire staff. At every grade level and every school, what they did to help the year end in extraordinary circumstances that we all know, but specifically to honor the graduates at PHS. From everyone I've heard from, the graduates felt loved and cared for, and it was a week all about them. And the final ceremony that they did, like a drive-in theater almost, was all my friends and their kids who were graduating said it was extraordinary. So I think we owe them all a debt of gratitude, and look forward to better times ahead when our kids can be back in school.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Up next on the agenda is any other business? Any other business? Any other business? I hear none. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, come on, guys.
Rosen.
Thank you,
Rosen,
George.
So moved.
Who's
I'll
got the second?
George.
Everyone's
I'll second George. It's a group second.
Okay. I'll call a voice vote. All in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed, any objections, any abstentions? Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Great meeting,
Look forward
Jeff.
to seeing you in person.